Hi, welcome to episode 15 of Kim's Art Show. We are working in gouache, opaque watercolor. I mentioned that I welcome your feedback. You can always email me through my website, kimweineck.com. But I know a lot of you have bought gouache. Mine are very diminished, and so I've had the opportunity to go to art supply stores and get really good gouache and fill them up. And I don't know, I have this funny joy every time that I use up a thing of paint. Like, what have I done? I've created, XYZ. I have the same feeling when I use up toothpaste. I'm like, wow, so silly, but I love it. I love to feel that sense of accomplishment, be it painting or toothpaste. So we are going to do a nocturne today. And I am always looking for references. I'm always looking at the world around me to figure out what I want to paint. And my daughter in college has 3 roommates, and they all have a really beautiful eye for photos. And so one of her roommates shared this nocturne, and I printed it on bad paper with our bad printer, and it's got lines through it, but it's really pretty. It's very tight value range. What does that mean, right? That means that rather than go like 1 through 9, white through black, right? It might only be hanging out in the middle. Might only be values like 4, 5, 6, 7. Or is it more like 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So we're going to play with that today. Last episode and this, we're talking about brushes. Say more quicker with bigger brushes, more expressive with movement. And so I have this handy dandy little thing about brushes. So there are different kinds of brushes. And last episode I talked about natural bristle or nylon synthetic. So I tend for all brushes. They all do different things. And I love art supplies. But lately I'm very interested in, because this is water-based medium, natural bristle, because they hold more of the liquid and you get a bigger reservoir to make marks. So this is a flat. A flat is like this, right? It has a decent size bristle length and it's flat across the top. This is a bright. It's similar, but it's shorter. This has like no reservoir. It's more for like blending and shoving paint around. So a filbert is like this guy, where it's like a flat, but it's lost its edges. I tend to not buy filberts because in time, all of my flats become filberts. A round, right, just like you think. It just is the traditional brush that you picture in your head. Rounds come all different sizes. And then a script, a liner, or a rigger. A rigger is, this one was in the water too long, so now it's permanently canted that way. But it's also, I wanted to show you this one because this is not a natural bristle brush, so it tends to not be reparable, whereas if it were not synthetic, if it were natural, I could reform it. They're called riggers because you could get really long lines, and like, let's say you were painting a ship, you could do the rigging with that. The funniest name is an Egbert. And Egberts are like filberts, but round and long like that. And then a fan. I don't really use fan brushes. I'm not sure why. I bet next episode I'll be like, fan brushes are my new favorite, but right now, no. So we're going to do this nocturne, and again, we're going to do it this square format. And I did a small study of it at home. And these are the colors that this more was. And I don't know where we'll land, because it doesn't necessarily matter what the colors are as more as the value is right. And value is what I was talking about here, the lightness or darkness of a color. But I'm going to leave that out for me so that I just have another reference to consider. So there's a horizon, there's a tree line, there's the reflection, there's some funky stuff here, mountain, I guess, more tree line, and then down. And then, like, if I want to give myself a map, right, because the underpainting for me is very map. This is where it's darker in the sky. This is where there's like clouds and light. So dark, 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 and then the lighter part of the sky. So it's my map. Dark part, and then the super dark part. Kind of a mess. That's how my paintings start. So here's a nice flat, and let's start at the top. Let's get a dark in. So this color is just black, dark, like blackish. So I am going to lean toward more blue. And right now that is just so dark that I'm going to add a little light blue to my mixture and see where I end up. I like that. Not sure the camera can pick up the nuance, but it's just a little finer, lighter. And then here I am with the flat on its side, getting a nice edge. So not like the last episode where my painting was very, the edges were kind of like splayed and natural. This one is a little cleaner edge. Okay. I'm not going to do the reflection yet because this is very wet into wet. In other words, I want the benefit of this being somewhat wet to blend in and soften some of the marks in the sky. So what color am I going to choose? Ugh, I don't like the color I chose. Oh, this isn't bad. So this is a very gray color. It's a little too dark, so I'm going to lighten it up with pink. Oh, but I do like that. Flat brushes give hard, angular edges. And if I wanted it to be soft, right, rounds tend to do a better job. I'm going to lighten it up still some more, probably with white. Let's see. More water. Warming it up. So when I say things like warmer, cooler color, episode 7 is a deep dive into color mixing. So maybe visit that if you want more information on warm colors, cool colors, and the like. It's one of my favorite episodes because I so love talking about color. Okay. So I'm not going to get too finicky as I start to claim this. Who knows? It's the exploration. Okay. Now, my water's still pretty clean, and I can like soften things if I want. Let's get that dark for the bottom. Remember my technical term of the yuck period? Just about starting that when I start to think like, I am being recorded for a show and this looks crazy. It's all right, just keep going, push. So the edge where this meets is soft. And right now that's really crazy looking. So look, nice water. You can lift it. Clean my brush, lift. And I want it to kind of move down. But if I clean my brush in between, right, I can get some really nice edges. Then there's also the almighty finger, right? Play with that. Okay, so we've got some good stuff happening. Every time I compliment my own painting, I crack myself up. What are we without humor, right? Okay, so you can kind of see sky reflection. So let's do those. Nice and dark. I'm starting with that Prussian blue, which is the color that's akin to like navy, or Payne's gray, which is the black that has ultramarine blue in it. Let's see what it looks like on its own. Like that's just straight color. I think it's too blue, so I'm going to add burnt sienna to it, which is warm. It's a nice warm brown. When colors say burnt, burnt umber, burnt sienna, they become warm in the burning of them. So funny, because you can get raw sienna, raw umber. Those colors are not as deep, not as warm. The warmth kind of, I think, lets you see into them more. I have a funny story about burnt sienna, yeah, and raw sienna. When I was in my 20s, long time ago, I went to Italy with friends. They were going, they'd rented a place, and they had like a tiny room available that I could stay in. I wasn't married, I just finished art school, so I was like, my gosh, I'm going. And every day, like we'd start in our place in like Tuscany, Umbria, and we would go and come back and go and come back. And after many days of that, I was like, I'm done. I'm staying back here and I'm just painting or walking around, like too much, you know, tourism. And of course, the day that I said that, my friend was like, Kim, you have to come to Siena, home of burnt and raw, like, and of course, it was so beautiful. Those colors were everywhere, in the bricks of the cathedral, in the streets, everywhere, that beautiful Siena. And it was like my favorite day. They had the best pizza. Loved it. And it's just still one of the funniest lines in my memory. Kim, you have to come, home of burnt and raw. So you can kind of, if you step back, even without it covered entirely, that there is like a reflection and a landmass. I wish this were softer, but I'll get to that. So there's this connector. I need to kind of think about what I saw and knew. My website has a blog section. And I wrote a blog about a nocturne that I did. It was from when I was driving home from my boyfriend, now husband's house. And it was such a beautiful scene in the night that I pulled over and I took out my checkbook. Old story, right? We just had our 20th anniversary. And there was the old like deposit slips that, you know, you didn't really use so much. And I scribbled on that, like, you know, that bad drawing that I did, but it was like what I was seeing, and then shapes. And then I made a little key, like 1 through 7. What was the darkest? What was the lightest? And then I wrote down recipes for what those colors were. That was really a fun painting to do, just based on that check deposit slip. And I think doing things like that helps reinforce your visual memory. So like when I'm trying to paint and it's not coming out, like I can try to access that visual memory and be like, what do I want it to say that I'm not getting either like in the reference or in the painting, but I might have seen somewhere or had some experience regarding. There's another aspect to that story about that that nocturne that I painted from the check deposit slip. And it was a summer that Mars was in the landscape. And it was fascinating because when you could see the stars, right, they're all like different shades of blue to white. There was one mark in the sky that was red. And it was like, holy cow, you know? And so the painting had Mars in it. And I had titled the nocturne Mars. And like those inkjet giclée prints had just come out. And so I sold a few inkjet prints of Mars because I loved how it came out and I loved the painting. Anyway, then years later, one of the people in town that I didn't know became, you know, when we moved here, she and I became closer and she's become a collector of mine. And out of the blue, I got this photo in a message from her. Is this you? And it was Mars. And it was signed with my maiden name. So it was like an older painting. And it was kind of cool that we had found each other just in like this new life. Okay, so I tend to have shapes grow when I paint. So see, I am smallening some of the shapes. And with a wet brush, I am making these edges a little softer. Remember that when gouache dries, it's lighter than when it's wet. So some of that looks really dark, but it won't be. I think I'm going to play with this next. Just a little darker at the top, perhaps. I could have gone even bigger brush, but I didn't like the quality of the one that I had. Okay. So I want to make some suggestions that there's like a water line and a reflection. And I'm going to do that. Let me just soften some of that. I can't help it. There's like a, you can't really see it because it's behind, but also because the value change is very, very slight. But it is gray, and so gray. To gray down blue, I need the opposite, which is like orange. And I added just a little too much, so it ended up kind of this yucky color I didn't want, but I arrived where I wanted it to be. And so, right, like using the brush for what it is, you know, good for. Let's see. Right, you can make so many different shapes with all the brushes. And I think I've said before, but it bears repeating, that if you don't want to paint sometime, just play, like make washes, experiment with the marks that your brush make, because like that's a really valuable time spent. All right, so a little bit more abstract-y. I still really like it. I think I can always refine. It's just how much do I want to. And I see this is glary, so it's still pretty wet. There's a nice change here between the dark and the dark of the sky, but this could maybe even be darker. So I'm going to play with that, I think. A rare time that I'm dipping into black, adding a little brown and that navy blue. There are very small differences in the darks, but it matters. A little more water just so that the brush moves easily. So it's super dark. It won't be so dark when it dries. Reflections aren't necessarily as dark either. Anyway, kind of getting into that. Okay, I'm going to darken some of this because this is really dark, so I want to play with that. And with my water, I'm just going to pull this across. Got some on my paper. That's all right. So the reflection, right, like let's kind of pull the paint down to give some sort of a feeling of like that verticality. Oh, it's got a nice drip there. I like that. You know what I think is great? One of the feedback things that I've heard is that the show is relaxing. It's a huge compliment. And I find it such a contrast to how I feel about the show because I am not relaxed. I'm so nervous, like what is happening on the surface. All right. So then this other thing that I don't want it to get overworked. So let's put that one down and get out a smaller round that has a decent point. There's one. There are tiny suggestions of light. And over here is dry. You don't do this when it's not dry because it doesn't show up the same. So I took it down because I wanted to see it a little better. This brush might be a little big. Let's see. So it's pretty clean white. I added a tiny bit of like a Naples yellow to the white because I don't want it to feel too bright. And it kind of does feel too bright. So I said this before, I think it's episode 3 that I did a nocturne that like I love doing this and I always mess up the moon or the light. Okay, so it scumbles a little reflection down. Okay, then there's playing with that same color. There are really tiny little lights in the distance, like that. See, it's still wet. a long time ago, someone was like, Kim, your paintings are nice, but like there's no evidence of humans in them. I was like, so what's wrong with that? So I started to put like houses or architecture in. But even just these little kisses of light matter because they give an impression of, like someone else is out there. Right, and these little marks, like you have to make them kind of painterly. And what do I mean by that? It's like, don't make them so like perfectly round. They have to kind of be messy. They have to feel like they're filtered through space, atmosphere, through the water, whatever it is. Now, frustratingly, that just connected. That doesn't make sense. So I'm just gonna cover that over. And maybe that reflection's too high, so I blot it out a little. But I like that, right? So you have this sense of there's like this reflection, there's a shore, maybe a car is hanging out at the shore, right? We fill in the details that we want. In the way distance, there's like people driving, a little town, who knows? And then more over here. Let's put some stars in the sky because we can. And because I think that doing things like that moves our eye around. And here's where, you can be as finicky, or I don't know, do we try to put in the Big Dipper? Ish. Right, there's a lot. Do I put in Mars like that nocturne that I had done all those years ago? If the stars are showing up through some of that like sky, they're going to be brighter because they're going to be in contrast to some of the other light, so you have to paint those brighter. And my brush made it crazy looking because it doesn't come to a point. Anyway, so I'm just having fun now. And I think that's always the point. Have fun. So what would make this feel done to me is maybe I can refine some of these things. I can clean up the edges. I can, I touched it. I can address those sides, like where this edge, where the tree line meets the sky. Maybe I'll lighten up that sky a little more. But right, I think it's a fun nocturne. It's so much fun to paint nighttime. You get to use these deep, deep tones that kind of just pull you in. And with gouache, it sits on the surface and it's that beautiful matte finish. So, hey, I made a nice change, I think, into this lavender story. I like them both. So I look forward to showing you in a future episode where this lands. And I look forward to showing my daughter's roommate, whose reference it was, how they came out. Well, I hope you give it a shot. Again, it'll be on my website, so you can give it a shot yourself with credit to my daughter's roommate. The perfect name of summer, right? Doesn't that feel like summer? Summer, summer. So thanks so much for tuning in.